Welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to look into Docker exec commands a little more deeper. From what we already know, let me become root. So we know that Docker exec is used to run a command in a container that has already started, right? So we know this. So let's at least start a container. We don't have one. Run detached. Let's name it something for our ease. Ubuntu, because we are using Ubuntu. I mean, it could be anything, you know that. So we have our container now, and we want to execute commands in it. So we are familiar with this. Docker execute container name and my command, which could be anything. And that's how easy it is. We already know that, but I'm not explaining this again. So yeah, you can run like basically any command, but you just have to keep in mind that the command has to be an executable. What that essentially means is, let's say this was a command, right? Like list is some executable, but if you go, let's say in comma, inverted quotes, because it's a long command for say echo A and echo B, and this will fail because file not found in path. It's not an executable. But if you want to run commands like this, so you can turn it into executable using this. So this is Linux. This is not a Linux class, but that's how you do that. So just to point out, a command you're entering should be an executable. That's the only requirement. And then it will work. And once you do that, that's fine. So that's the basic of it. And what if you want to run multiple commands? You're not going to Docker execute every time. Will be painful. So for that, you can do what you do in Docker run. I want to run execute a command by interacting with terminal inside the container Ubuntu, and I want to bash. And there you go. You enter inside that container, root at the container ID. You are a root user. You can run anything you want, make directory. All right. Whatever. So you can run multiple commands and configure the container however you need by entering it. And if you exit, the container would still be running because we did start it with detached flag. So that's one thing. Next up is when you enter a command inside the container, let's say, what's my working directory? It's going to be root. That's the default for all of the images, unless you have your own personal configured image. Of course, you might have configured it differently, but by default in all images, the default directory where the command executes is the root directory. And in some cases, well, in a lot of cases, you might have a code in particular folder. So, and you want to run a command that packages the code or runs the code, git clones it or git pushes it, something like that. You need to be in certain different directory. So for that, we have a work directory flag. Hey, Docker execute. When you execute the command, execute in etc directory. That's where my code is. That's not where my code is. I'm just saying, Of course, container name would be same. So execute the command. To test, I'm just using the command to test which directory I am in. And I'm in etc. So that's very handy in a lot of cases. And what else do you need with Docker exec? Yes. In a lot of cases, you would need environment variables, especially in CI/CD. This is so important. So pay attention to this. And CI/CD environment variables are very, very important. So when you are giving environment variable, you just let it know when you're executing this command, make sure this environment variable is there when you're executing this command. So if you're going to docker exec again, this variable won't exist. It's not inside the container. It's more of this command situation. So let's figure that out, test it out, right? Let me say I entered an environment variable is equals to 1 in my container, and to see if my variable actually did go inside, I'm just going to grab it from all the variables inside, and let's see. Yeah, it's there. All right. But if I don't pass it this time, would it be there? No. So you understand, this environment variable only exists until that command exists. It won't be stored in the container. If you want to store it in a container, you go inside the container and add it there. But in the way container works, they try to keep everything outside. So, and what if you have a lot of variables? There is an answer to that too. You create a file, my environment variables. It could be anything, obviously, and you just enter your own all variables. Cat 0 what. Let's do 2 anything else, it could be anything. This is just an example, and you save the file. Now instead of giving one variable, you get a flag that says, hey, my environment file is here, which contains all my variables. Just look at it. It's in the current directory, or whatever the path is, just directed towards that path. And this has more than just var variables. So let's see all of the variables after you pass this file. And when you look at all of the environment variables, you will see the ones I have entered. So this is also very handy. Lastly, I think this can be handy in some cases. As we did in Docker run detach, you can execute a command inside the container that keeps it detached. So, it could be anything, but the same procedure, only D flag is added. Let's say, whatever. God. Of course. So that's mostly how Docker execute works. That's the most basics of it. Actually, that's all of it. And now we know Docker run and Docker exec in a good amount. And next we are ready to create our images. So a new video would be better for that one. It's going to be a long one, I think. We are going to configure a container, make changes using these commands, and then create an image out of it. And we will understand the significance of it. Stick with me and have fun.